Well, it's my great pleasure to be with Jim Perrin today. Hello, Jim. How are you?
How's you doing, Myrddyn? How are you doing?
I'm fine. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm barely surviving the rigours and vicissitudes of life, but on the whole, I'm okay. I'm not complaining. Are you complaining?
I'm not complaining
Don't
either.
complain.
I think life is wonderful,
not worth
Jim.
Complaining. No one listens anyway. It's a big turn off having people complain.
Well, I'm going to open the floor up to Jim today to talk about a subject matter that is quite close to your heart, Jim. So, do you want to introduce that to the viewers?
Land. That's where I'm standing. I'm standing upon land. I have a connection with land through my 2 feet here, but also through my mind, through my soul, through my feelings. Land is very important to me. But do you know what I think, Myrddyn? I think we've lost our connection to the land. I think society in the 21st century is disconnected. We've lost this very important base. We're no longer rooted in land and in land values. And what really disturbs me is that these days we're all planet salvationists. And we all have this sense that we're going to save the world. And yet we ignore the very obvious fact that you can't save the world unless you have reverence for the land. The land is crucially important because that is our world. That's where we are. We are standing on land which is a part of the world, and yet the eco-salvationist view is that we can do what we like to land so long as it saves the planet. Well, I'm sorry, but the planet is a bit too big for my comprehension. What I want to do is to take it right back to 60s politics, to that revolutionary, wonderful movement in the 60s, which held that the personal is the political. And if we do not have a consciousness of the value of land to us as individual human beings, then the rest of it is hypocrisy, it's posturing. We've got to care for the land, we've got to care for the here and now of the land that we live in. And we mustn't ruin that in the cause of saving the planet, because we're not saving the planet when we're destroying the fabric of land. And this land connectedness we've been moving away from since the Industrial Revolution. We've felt at liberty to screw up the land, to despoil it in any way that we like, and not care about it because we no longer rely on it for the everyday sustenance, because it all comes in from places all over the world. But in terms of everyday sustenance, I think that this is important food for the soul. And once you destroy it, where have you got to go where you can find peace and the primal things, the world of nature, the undespoiled world of nature? Where else but on the land, which must be preserved. It must be kept in its original state and its original beauty somewhere in the world. Because when that goes, you have no sense of nature, of the turn of the seasons, of regeneration, of the eternal cycle of transience and regeneration. And if we don't have that, I think we become very confused, very frightened, very removed from the basic solace that you can take from nature and set against the fact of our temporal hold on existence. It's so brief, our tenure on existence. And all that we can put against that, and this is an important philosophical point, is the fact that the world goes on, nature regenerates, the transient and the ephemeral are a part of that cycle, but ultimately nature itself renews, nature fulfills. The spring comes round again, as surely as day follows night. And what particularly concerns me with, say, the Green Movement is that it argues that in order to save the planet we must be prepared to make sacrifices. But the sacrifices that the Green Movement asks us to make, I think, are just too large at times, because they're actually to sacrifice the intimate sense of the planet that is all-sustaining. Now, there's a very interesting point here in Wales. Green zealotry argues that we have to have and not only green zealotry but also the government, and I'll come back to that point in a minute, argues that we must have renewable energy sources, that we must give over the land to the production of green energy, sustainable energy, eco-energy. But there's a problem with this. I mean, there are lots of problems. I mean, for a start, it's a scam in many respects. But how can you say something is saving? We're back to this conundrum. How can you say something is saving the planet when it's destroying the land? It's not a possibility. It's oxymoronic, to my mind. I don't like to see the hills of Wales, which have been the most important spiritual solace to me throughout my life, given over and despoiled by the erection of monstrous and unrecyclable, has to be said, wind turbines. You know, you can't destroy those wind turbines. They can't be reused, and they never in their life recoup the energy that was put into their production. It's very interesting. Now, it's another little anomaly that the green movement doesn't seem to take account of. But I think I'll digress here and I'll go off into the politics of this. Now, the government wants us to espouse green energy. Personally, I think I have no objection on principle to renewable sources of energy, but I don't think that they should be brought in at the cost of the land, which they are being done. And I don't think that we should accept Trojan horses being driven by governments into the heart of the green movement, wedges which prize apart. You know, the old principle of divide and conquer is so strong now in this country. The principle of spin is applied to selling to us the notion of renewable energy. We're not being sold the notion that we all need to cut down on our energy consumption, which is a much more important emphasis, I think. Why do we need to maintain current levels of energy? What do I think we do? I think that we can bring those down. We can do without things. We can adopt a simpler lifestyle, a more sustainable lifestyle. We don't need to ruin what we've got. And it seems to me that the fundamental unit of eco-consciousness, which is what all this is about, has to be respect for the land. We have to put that as our primary consideration. You know, not save the planet, but respect the land. And let's draw a distinction between those two. I think anyone who comes along and says, I want to save the planet, what they're actually saying is, I want to rule the planet, I want to be important, I want power. The politicians certainly want that. I'm extremely suspicious about the direction of green zealotry. And I think a lot of it is a lie. And I think that it, particularly in things like wind energy, for example, what you're getting is something being sold to you that's actually dishonest. Because wind power is essentially a scam. It's completely uneconomic. It will never pay for itself. It will never be reliable. It will always have to have backup from conventional energy resources. And whilst that's going on, it will ruin the landscape. Now, the landscape is crucially important, and that goes. So the spiritual solace, the spiritual sustenance of the people has been taken away from them. By whom has it been taken away? By the politicians. What do the politicians get out of it? Well, let's look at some specific instances there, because the politicians actually invest personally and very heavily in green energy, in things like, and I'll come back to this example of wind turbines again. If you look at the family investment, the family income from wind technology of David Cameron, for example, or Nick Clegg, what do they get out of this? Is there an element of corruption going on here? On the family estates of David Cameron, there are hundreds of wind turbines sited, located. On the family estates of Samantha Cameron, there are a few dozen, not so many, But nonetheless, those will bring in a couple of thousand a year pin money for her. Cameron, of course, David Cameron, will be getting millions from his because of the structure of reward for those who allow renewable energy sources to be located on their land. The land that they own, i.e. the land which their forebears stole at the time of the Enclosures Acts, which is now being taken from us again, having been given back to us in terms of access quite recently. It's now being given back to us, but we're being told, oh yeah, you can have it back, or you can have access to it back. But by the way, we're going to ruin it, we're going to despoil it, we're going to make it so that it's not worth going to, because all you will see will be 400-foot high wind turbines with access roads and concrete bases which will ensure that that land never recovers in our lifetimes, in our children's lifetimes. So anyway, here you have these politicians who are investing in this wind energy, who are ensuring that the returns and rewards on wind energy, sustainable energy locations are very great, and they benefit by that. And then you have the wife of Nick Clegg, she's a lawyer, so you might question her expertise in this area, but she's a director of a company that manufactures wind turbines. So here we have David Cameron, Samantha Cameron, Nick Clegg and his wife taking an awful lot of money from this energy source that they're so keen to promote, despite the fact that it ruins the land, despite the fact that it despoils the environment. So how's that saving the planet? And what are the other implications around it? And what does this particular form of energy need to have around it to prop it up so that at times of peak demand, and in times of winter, when there's no wind, for example, in the chill times of winter, where is the energy going to come from? Oh, it's going to come from the old sources. So actually, these sources aren't effective. They're not reliable, but they do bring us, the politicians, in a great deal of money. And this was all set up very carefully in America 20 years ago by a particular corporation, the name of which is now not really a gold standard of ethical behaviour. Wind technology has its source in investment by the Enron Corporation. I think I'll leave you on that note with the injunction to be very suspicious about those who purport to save the planet but don't give a toss about the land. Hey, a little rant for you. How long did I go on for there?